All right, Padawans, it's time to master faction wars. Hello, everyone. Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and I am not alone. I have my friend MTGJedi here. He is the master of faction wars, and we are here to talk about hard faction wars. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so good. I'm very excited to be talking about faction wars. I'm very excited that it's actually going to be a thing. You know, it's one of those things we've been talking about for a long time. Never thought it would come to the game, but it's on its way. I couldn't be more excited, and thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, it's been fun. You and I are definitely faction wars folks. It's one of our favorite content pieces. In fact, I think one of the first collabs I ever did was going on your channel talking about our wish list for hard faction wars, and that was fun. It's certainly not everything we asked for, but at the same time, it might be more. It's interesting. It was a fun video. I'll probably actually throw a link up to it up here somewhere too. And yeah, so we're here to talk about prepping for faction wars because there's a lot to think about for end game accounts. You kind of probably haven't even thought about faction wars for a while, and you're probably going to have to think about it a lot differently. And for new players, a lot of this stuff is going to be good for both the existing and the hard faction wars because a lot of the theories should be the same. You're going to need to 3-star every floor. You're going to have specific conditions. It looks like they're very specific conditions for the 3rd star now, so it's no longer going to be 3rd star let's go to one I have keys in. It's no longer going to be the 5 stars, 5 champions here. That's going to be the 2 stars. So there's not going to be this 3 or 4 champions, no loss. And that actually makes a lot of sense because this was no longer an issue after like floor 3 for most people. And so that's going to be interesting. And obviously that's something we can't predict on our end, but we can talk to you about team composition. We can talk to you about gearing. We can talk to you about just some of the general strategies. And that is what we're here for. So I think I'm going to kick it over to you. And what do you want to talk about first?
Well, the first thing on my mind is I thought that the whole caveats thing for the 3rd star was just bosses. You think that's going to be for the floors as well?
I don't know. I hope it's going to be just for the bosses, because if it's for the floors as well, that's going to be really weird. But then again, they talked about things like killing a certain number of people with a certain skill or something like that. So I could see it for a floor too. It could easily be, have one champion make 10 of the kills or something like that would actually be an interesting but easier one, for example.
That would definitely make it more of a challenge. Here's what I hope. I hope that we have a choice of which special thing to do in order to clear it, regardless of if that's on the floor or on the boss. I hope it's not just, here's your one annoying thing, you must do it this way. Like, give us a choice of 3 different things, and that would be interesting to me. But as for now, we just don't have that information, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I hope that they don't do is I hope it's not one of these things where you must do this, and in order to do this, you must have this specific champion, which
Right.
has happened before, and I'm really hoping that it's not something like I could see Knights Rev, for example, having requires to be under perfect veil for one of them, and it's like, okay, well, you need Rector Drath, and if you don't have Rector Drath, which to be fair at least is an epic, so it's not like it's not like you must have this void legendary or mythical to complete this at 3 stars. If they do
Yeah.
something like that, that's just, people are gonna riot. So
Right. Yeah, fair. And like same thing with specific skills like heck. Like we can get a gear set that gives us that heck. But
mhm.
like, do we really have to RNG that? You know what I mean? Like, at least put some thought into what restrictions you're giving us and what champions are available in those factions for those restrictions.
Yeah, so like I could certainly see like Demon Spawn requiring you to use burn damage, for example. That one makes some sense because there's so many burners in that faction. It's not a limiting factor compared to other situations. So awesome.
Well, you wanna jump in and talk about team compositions then, since we're like right here in this
Yeah,
high elf script?
sure. So we can do that. I did bring up from my derping through faction wars. I've got that in the background here. So let me go hide myself quickly because now you can see we have damage, enhancers, revivers, and protectors, and we have somebody else giving this presentation other than me, but that's fine. But yeah, definitely a fun backronym. But it's a good guide for team. You've got your damage to do damage. You've got your enhancers to basically enhance the kind of damage you do and keep you alive a little bit as well. You got revivers that really, you're going to need revivers at some stage in this until you're an ultra endgame account. You need revivers to do the keep everyone alive quests already still until you're an end game enough account where you can just kind of mow through the bosses. So you're going to need a reviver because these are going to be much harder stages. And then finally your protectors, your controls, your increase on buffs, your healing, that sort of stuff. So that pretty much covers every role you're going to need. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Anything specific that you're looking for as far as that?
My first question with any new content is, can you just kill it? So like if
Mhm.
I just bring in I'm working on like a He-Man video. If I bring in my He-Man, can I just nuke all of the waves and then not worry about it?
Mhm.
Like, is there something that's gonna prevent me from doing that? You know? And there's a lot of ways that they can prevent you from just straight nuking the waves. Putting in champions like Leorius or Cheshire Cat who have a way to protect themselves and not die. Same with any other, man-eater type champions. That all can be annoying, but we got to remember like these are going to be really tanky, like really stat intensive champions, even more so. Like I would imagine by the top of the tower, you would get to approximately Centranos hard for terms of difficulty. Do you think that that's a good expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're gonna get to like soul crossed level difficulty, but I think we're gonna
Oh, I
get.
think we will.
Oh, you think we will? Wow.
I do. Yeah, I do. For like the last 4 levels or so.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's to be fair, Soul Cost, part of the reason that Soul Cost is difficult is not just because of the stats of the champions, but they often give you some limited, so it's these limited epics that are off affinity that are doing the wrong thing. So I don't think it will
Yeah.
end up being quite as hard as Soul Cross is, but I think you're right. The stats on the champions, right, could be Soul Cross level, which are, definitely harder than the Doom Tower hard by a long shot. Doom Tower hard is kind of like where you start to get to when you're getting in out of the first area of the city in Soul Cross. So it's
Yeah.
a little bit better than that. But yeah, so you're talking probably 200 to 250 speed on the waves, even
Right.
possibly.
That was my first thought was at the top levels, we're probably going to need champions over 250 or a speed booster in order to get our team over that. And you see that kind of on the hard dungeons as well. So I feel like that's like a good parallel, you know?
So yeah,
Um,
it's hard. I mean, I can't even see in my curse city here. There's a certain pot where I just say this is just too much and I can't deal
Me
with it.
too.
This is normal, but the
Yep.
hard one here, I've got some of these floors are just, and a lot of it is the restrictions here. So like, I've got Esme, so maybe Esme will help me with this floor, but it's just you've only got so few champions to be able to deal with it, and I don't expect them to do the must require force champions or HP champions on the faction
No,
war
I don't
stuff.
think that, but I could see them doing all epics for one of the bosses. I could
Yeah,
definitely see that.
as one of the, especially
I
as one of
just
the
want
three
it to be
stars.
yeah, for the 3 stars, yeah. I just want it to be interesting. I want it to be, like, challenging, but not overwhelming, and Polarium does put a lot of thought process into that. But how do you balance that for, like, us players that have been playing for 5 years versus people who started this year? Like, that's gonna be difficult. So, I'm interested to see what the power level ends up being, but it would not surprise me if we get Curse City hard levels, hard dungeon mode levels, and then we need to come up with good team composition. Like
Yeah.
let's look at your barbarians team here. There's
Hmm.
no reviver in there, but you have Scylla the Drake.
Yeah.
So who would you take out for the reviver there?
Probably this team becomes, let's see. I like actually having the rare in here. And in fact, I think that's not a bad idea in general. And War Maiden is a good rare.
Yeah.
I could argue that I could probably get somebody else slightly better for decreased defense, but she works well and she gives me the rare constantly in here. Syl makes this a pretty easy carry. Freya gives me some pretty good control. If I felt that Freya wasn't a particularly good control for this, you can pretty easily swap to an Armand's, and
Oh
Armand's would
yeah.
basically be an ultimate one there. Loki
Right.
is another option that I think a lot of people have if they don't have an Armand's, because he was the free champion more recently. And
Right.
he actually provides some decent amount of control, particularly if you put him in something like a provoke set, for example, could be fun for that as
Mhm.
well. I think Freya does a better job overall
Yeah.
than Loki might, just as far as giving good utility, because she gives you the cleanse, the block, whatever else. The Fat Man's great because the ally attacks are very, very good. But again, I could
Yeah,
certainly
you
go
can.
remote control with this too and swap in like an Odin for something like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's going to be how much control am I going to need versus damage, how much what are we looking for from the support? Do I need all the extra support? But from this type of team here, or just going back to what's good, put Fat Man back in here. So I've
Okay.
got my single damage dealer, we've got our debuffer, we've got our protector, we've got our healer and reviver, and then we've got an additional enhancement support with the Fat Man. And this is a pretty well-rounded team, I think.
Yeah, there are other good options there for control as well. Like you could even go Hoscarl in there would
Yep.
be great paired with Scylla the Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have Freya, you can go Haikatoon. I like the idea of your speed booster for most players
Mm-hmm.
because then you only have to get one champion that's fast enough, and your other ones you can make much lower speed. I
All right,
don't think
there
you
she
have a
is.
Haikatoon leveled up, but
There we go.
she's there. She
So yeah.
so that type of thing, and then if you can get a speed aura in there as well, which Haikatoon has, that's going to give you more speed to help you with this. And Barbarians is great because it has a lot of great options. That's not going to change.
Yeah, and a lot of
You
these are
know?
free. Your Carl is actually another great free option here. So like this is literally a recent fusion champion and 4 champions you can get for free for just playing the game. And this would
Yeah.
actually be a really good team. So Barbarians is a great example for this actually. So we actually got pretty lucky with Barbarians being open when we were doing this too.
Yeah.
But yeah, your Carl is really good. If I wanted more support, because for some reason I didn't have enough support here, we could certainly go with an Opardon even.
Ooh, love
It's
that.
and that's the thing that's actually I think going to be fun for this for a lot of people is if you have a large roster, you're going to be able to pick from a bunch of champions. And if Polarium does this well, you may actually have to change your team up depending on what floor is happening here. And that would be
Yeah.
that's I think is actually going to be kind of fun if that's what's going to have
Yeah.
to happen. Now I realize that's going to be a challenge for newer players, but again, this is for people that are going to be post Lydia. So
Right.
anyone post Lydia is going to have almost every faction is going to have champions where you have to pick who's better in this role than somebody else, not who's the only person I have in this role, because that's how you
Yeah.
get through faction wars. So you're
So
talking
you
about
think
accounts
like
that have been playing 6 month-ish minimum, maybe a year in some cases.
oh yeah, I was gonna say more than a year. I
Yeah.
think for the average player, it probably takes over a year to get Lydia. If you're a baller, you really know what you're doing, you could do it in less time.
Mm.
So pat yourself on the back if you got it sooner than a year. But just don't feel bad if you're still working on it. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Like where you're at is fine. You just do what's fun, make the progress that you're enjoying, and then, hit us up. We'll help you out with your faction war teams. We love doing that.
So obviously, champions is not a problem for this particular account, obviously, but gear, because that's one of the other
Yeah.
things to consider, especially with some of these different champions here. And we got a couple good examples here. Freya and Loki are both all AoE champions, for
Mhm.
example, so they're good examples of a stun set might be very, very valuable in here. Any other gear recommendations you can think of immediately? I can think of a few too. So
Oh yeah. I'll let you hit up some obvious ones. One that I think is going to be insanely helpful that maybe people haven't thought about is the toxic set. There are probably going to be some factions where, man, you just can't fit in a damage dealer. Like all you have is some like little squishy guy that can't survive and you need damage in some way. The toxic set can do that. You can just heal yourself, you can control them a little bit, and if there was a gear set that did HP burn, I bet you we get that this year. That will be helpful as well. So those kind of bonus damage stats, as well as your War Master masteries, are going to start coming back to help you here. So I think that toxic set's really clutch. And what made me think of that is on my like early mid game account, what I call it the Corrado account, I run Loki in a toxic set, and you get tons of poisons, tons, because it's that AoE A1 like you were talking about.
Hmm.
What's the next one you want to go to besides my sleeper pick toxic?
No, I think that's an interesting option. You've got some of the basic sets here. Regeneration, it's always nice to have some regeneration sets or any of the derivatives of regeneration. So Guardian's pretty decent as well. It's actually nice for the ally protection stats parts of it as well, and it's farmable. Bolster is going to be key if you've got bolster, either if you've paid or you've gone through the Forge Pass enough to be able to get a bunch of free bolster as well. That's a good one. And those are really good. Even some Immortal, I think Immortal is going to gain some value just because sometimes you've got champions are just not quite tanky enough, and Immortal gives them extra HP as well as a little extra healing. Provoke, another good AoE one as well. I think it's very
Did we
underrated from a
mention stun too?
Hmm?
Did we mention
Stun, yeah. Well, you
stun
did not
first?
mention stun. So stun is certainly better than
Okay.
provoke, but
Yeah, but
yeah.
depends on what your gear is, right? There are plenty of people who have decent provoke and nothing in stun, or vice versa.
Yeah, and it's again the other thing too is that's nice with that is a provoke Loki, for example, if you're using a Loki, is good for Hydra as well. So you can get use out of some of
Right.
these things in other places, and that is certainly one thing to consider. Obviously, if you have all the silver, you can move all this gear around, infinitely, and you're certainly going to probably move some gear around to get all those 3 stars. It's a great way to deal with getting 3 stars in some of this stuff, but
Yeah.
you don't you don't have to constantly be rebuilding all these champions, and if you can find a good build that plays in multiple areas like the provoke set, then that's great. Like I love Necmo and provoke, and Necmo and provoke I think
Yeah.
is one of the best builds for Necmo period, just because it's got so much
Yeah.
extra utility.
I wanna sneak in Stone Skin here. You're right there on the screen with Stone Skin. Oh man, I think Stone Skin could be the thing that helps people 3-star stage, especially if you go with like the 2-turn Stone Skin on your damage dealer. Like you have somebody who is gonna be clutch for your damage. You throw them in 6-piece Stone Skin, and you, like you said, you can move those builds around with your presets,
Mhm.
and that's going to go every round. So whatever your third round is, whether that's the boss or whether that's a wave, you're going to get that stone skin buff at the beginning of that round.
Yeah, and I think protection's actually going to be very viable for this because one of the things a lot of bosses are starting to do is play more with cleansing, with buff
Hmm.
strip, that sort of stuff as well. And protection is just, and Chimera is probably the best proof we've had so far of a boss that it's almost required to have somebody in protection set for that. It's just so good. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I
Totally
mean,
agree.
Supersonic could actually
Swift,
be kind of
Swift parry
interesting.
procs.
Which one?
Swift parry procs. Swift parry.
Swift parry, yes, that would be
Yeah.
great. Yeah, swift parry, that would be great. Obviously Slayer's a damage set. Feral could definitely be good for bringing some extra stuff in there. I don't think Sheep's going to be
Mhm.
a problem, so Pinpoint Feral isn't great for that, but the stats are great, so it's kind of hard to complain. Impulse and Reflex can be very good. Those are sets
Yeah.
that if you, especially for the wave clear, where you want to clear one wave and it's enough of a struggle, you may not be able to A1 cycle into the next wave, or if you don't want to manual every time you run the wave, something like that gives you the extra reset could be very, very good. I think this, not Stone Cleaver, but the Rebirth set, I think, is eventually going to be very viable as well. That, again, that's not going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of, but that's just so good for revivers.
You know what though? I did a video this week on Rebirth. I had like absolute trash gear on my Uko, and it was really good. So it almost doesn't matter what Rebirth you have.
Hmm.
If you have, I think you need 6 pieces though. If you can put a 6-piece set together, oh dude, it's so good. It's so good. So I would highly recommend that, but you do arena modes in order to get better at PvE, and you do PvE to get better at arena modes, and that's a cycle that's never gonna stop.
Hmm.
So, I would say suck it up and do that, but it's a game, it's supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun doing that, then don't. But if you are enjoying it, that those arena sets are really going to be helpful for Faction Wars for sure.
Yeah, I've been slacking on those 'cause I've been so focused on the free to play. My main has kind of lost a little bit of LA motivation. So, but yeah, and those are probably the easy sets. Another one we were talking about the requirement for Hex, so Cursed could be certainly interesting.
Yeah.
And honestly, that just brings extra damage and extra other things as well. So Cursed is actually a very good set, and again, that's very good for Hydra as well. And
Mhm.
finally, Relentless. There's nothing wrong with Relentless builders. I mean, heck, Syl is obviously in this. Syl is probably the classic, one of the best champions to put in Relentless because she's just absolutely amazing in it. And then, yeah, just other than that, it's going to be, you're going to want to watch your speeds because, again, we're probably talking about 225 to 250 speeds on a lot of these champions. The bosses, it would not surprise me if they're that fast at the level 21 because that would be the same as like hard 10 dungeons. That would be about right. And, yeah, it's going to be a gear check. It is going to be a roster check. And yeah, it's just preparing some of these sets. And again, that's where I need to get her to a collection. But if we go here, we've got the preset manager. So
Yeah.
you've got 50 global presets. There's nothing wrong with having, stun set number 1 and stun set number 2. And I think Ash talked about stun set 3 through 5 in some cases because it's kind of that bad in some cases. But, having
Yeah,
a couple of
I
stun
have the stun set presets for my Curse City stuff that I move around. I have 2 stun set presets and 2 bolster presets. And I think one of the cool things is we have the opportunity. We get to re-gear some of these, underused faction war champions that are going to be all of a sudden amazing. And maybe that's what we can talk about on my channel. These like value surge champions that are probably going to come out the woodworks. I don't know how much more
Yeah.
time we have, but do we have time to talk about the Great Halls?
Yeah, I think we do. We can wrap it up in the Great Hall then. I think that's
Okay,
good.
perfect.
And that is definitely one of the things. Obviously, do your classic arena Great Hall. I mean, mine's certainly done and maxed here, and this is great. And then I just get free gear every once in a while. But yeah, there is a Faction Wars thing right now, and assuming this works for hard Faction Wars, which to be fair, I would not be surprised if there suddenly became a hard Faction Wars second option, although I think that'd be kind of unfortunate.
That would be so messed up, but that would go towards my recommendation of save your crest just in case. I don't know if we're gonna need to put crests into Faction Wars. I don't know. It depends on the level of difficulty. But if we are, my number one thought, and let me know if you agree here, is ignore defense and then speed.
Yep.
I also like crit damage there, which is usually my third recommendation, but we might need resistance or accuracy depending on the requirements there. But the ignored defense, I think, is the most critical one because the longer your fights take, the more likely you are to lose somebody or your whole team. So that ignored defense helps you just bring the most amount of damage. And then the speed one, as the second one, helps you get your champions to the necessary levels so that you can actually, beat them without them doing all their shenanigans.
Yeah, it's very, very similar to kind of what I've got here going on with my Cursed City is actually a good example. I've gone ignore defense and speed pretty much neck and neck, and they seem to be about as important. Obviously, ignore defense, better for your damage dealers, but it helps everybody because everybody is dealing some damage. And then the increased speed helps absolutely everybody. Crit damage only helps your damage dealers, but again, when it helps your damage dealers, it's huge. Finally, HP and defense are slightly better than attack, but at some point in time, these are just easy to even out. And yeah, right now, I regularly don't have an issue. There's not a lot of issues with resistance, but if you end up needing a resistance build, resistance can be very valuable. So having this propped up a bit is very, very good. And accuracy, it just never hurts to be able to change your accuracy a little bit because you've got it in here to get something better. It is easy to overbuild your accuracy. In fact, I probably have done that on more champions than I know what to count at this point, but it doesn't hurt.
On the accuracy note, though, a lot of the damage dealers, they are the ones who you want the accuracy on. Like Thor's a great example, right? If you get that decreased speed out on a boss or the waves, that's going to help your whole rest of your team. And depending on where you're at with your gear and your progression and stuff, like you you might really need those accuracy bonuses in order to get accuracy and damage into a build.
Yeah. I mean, mine, again, I've overbuilt on accuracy on this particular guy, obviously, but most people don't have the gear to put Thor in Savage and Killstroke and this level of stats,
Right.
which keep on doing that. Do you keep on doing this since
No.
they moved this? I mean, I appreciate that they
Yeah.
finally did it, but it's
Slowly getting used to it. And see, like, this is a great example, right?
Mhm.
Your build's 232. It's a sick, amazing build. Almost 7,000 attack, 334 crit damage, 500 accuracy almost. But you're going to have to either have a speed booster there or controlling something. You're going to have
Mhm.
something else, or you're going to have to change this build
Yeah.
because we're thinking 250 speed plus.
Yeah, and it might be
And there's a
easy in
lot of
this
ways to
build,
do
yeah,
that.
but obviously, because I'm getting just this is easy,
Oh,
swap
yeah,
these
you
for
have
speed
attack incentive.
boots, nice and
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
But not everyone's going to be able to have done this because there's a lot of people that with speed boots, this would have been the build. And
Correct.
actually, that probably does finally close out because we talked about gearing. I think we actually did miss this and do these ascensions, especially if you can get speed on boots. But these are just all, that's why I've got too much accuracy because I've got accuracy here. I could certainly try to get this to attack, which would probably be better for the Thor build overall. But when I initially did it, I didn't have a lot of the Chaos Ore, so it's like, oh, that got accuracy? That's fine. That can go on Thor. It made sense.
Yeah.
And the crit damage is probably some of the most valuable for your damage dealers here. And then speed on the speed boots is gold when you can get it, and it's worth using the dust to reroll those. Even if these, like this is defense 80, that's not bad on a nuker because it helps keep them alive, which you might need to do in a wave. So don't
Yeah.
sleep on getting HP or defense up here, even if that's not what you're looking for in your build, because yeah, it's not the stat I want to do damage, but it means he'll survive a little bit longer. Talking to some of these arena experts, they'll ascend everything, and if it's not always the perfect stat, they'll still ascend it because stats are stats. And outside of
Yeah.
like if I got resistance on this particular build, which would be useless, every other stat has a purpose on a Thor.
Yeah. Just like leveling up your gear, you want to start with the gloves, chest, and boots. But I think that leveling the top row is something you'll do eventually, especially for your key champion. And then the same thing goes for your ring, your amulet, and your
Mhm.
banner. The amulet, in my opinion, is the most important one. For damage dealers, you want crit damage every time. And then your banner is the second most important one. If it's banner's nice.
I know.
If it's accuracy, you almost always want accuracy, but again, this is a damage dealer, so accuracy and attack works perfect.
Mhm.
And then your ring is the last one, but still super helpful.
Yeah, well, especially because you get a lot of percent stat bonuses on here. And again, if
Yeah.
this was, especially too, if this was a pinpoint ring, it doesn't need
Yeah.
all this attack. It could be nice because it gets you the extra accuracy, it gets you the extra speed, and 10 extra speed from having pinpoint, ring, and amulet is really, really hard to overstate how great that is for a lot of these builds. And,
Right.
I'll give up, 10% crit damage on it or 15% crit damage if I had to do a 5-star crit damage amulet just to get 10 extra speed. That's a huge boost. So, and then as far as the
Um,
ascensions are concerned, I think it's one of these things we talk about how lesser important these top pieces are because they're generally easier to farm. But these
right.
ascensions, because these ascensions you can only get attack, defense, or HP and flat, they're actually really easy to kind of tinker with a little bit. So especially if you're building a tanky champion that you don't need attack, you'll pretty much build all three of these, and if they're hitting attack, you re-roll it once and you're done. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up and move the rest of the discussion over to your channel?
Just I think patience. A large portion of the raid population has like, yeah, I'm not stressed about this. I'll get it eventually. But the other half is like, bro, I need it now. I want it done. I don't want any problems. And so I think just a reminder of patience, have fun with it. Go build some cool champions.
Hmm.
Like, whoever you find interesting or whatever's going to be fun in your team composition, and let's just chat about it. We love that stuff, and like in our discords, like I'm sure we're going to be talking about faction war teams in our live streams. We are. So just like, let's try to stay positive, even if the caveats are not what we'd want them to be.
Hmm.
You know, some of them are going to be annoying. Some of the waves are going to be annoying. I guarantee you they're going to throw double Seafy, double Roto, send like Fabian or some insane combinations together. They're going to do that, right? But it's the challenge that we need to overcome, and I'm super pumped about this content. I cannot wait until it comes out. It might be my most anticipated content that they've ever put in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, on the patience as well, I mean, looking at this account here, I don't expect I'm going to struggle too much to get close to floor 21 on any faction, because I'm a super endgame account. But even then, I am not going to be upset if I hit a roadblock on a couple of the factions, because either, you know, again, some of the conditions may just not suit my team, or it may literally just be enough of a gear check that I just can't maul through it. And that's a goal. That's a good thing. It's nice to have a little bit of friction, and that's actually kind of all the reason we've always liked Faction Wars is Faction Wars has always felt like the right kind of challenge. They're natural dividing points and limitations for your roster that make you think just a little bit differently, and because each faction does have a distinct identity, they'll play just a little bit differently. And this is going to be your chance to shine. If you like playing with team comps, if you like playing with new champions, Faction Wars has always been a great place to play with them, because you don't always need the best champions for Faction Wars. You need the right champions for your Faction Wars team.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, dude, I'm super excited. I know that we'll be trying to clear this with like epics and rares to make accessible teams for people. I'm super pumped about all that, man. Thank you so much for having me for this awesome conversation. Make sure, if you made it all the way at the end of the video, my dude Bront never asks for likes or subs, okay? So go hit both buttons and tell us your thoughts and feelings down there so we can chat with you.
Yep, absolutely appreciate it. And we'll leave links to his channel over there as well. And we will continue discussion over there. Again, you need all your Faction War content. The two of us have got you covered. We, you know, we love talking about this stuff. And, you know, I'm sure there'll be plenty of other content creators do all kinds of great stuff as well. This is going to be fun. And I expect some fun team comps from a lot of people, not just us, but also us. And, you know, this is going to be great. So we'll head on over to your channel, record that video, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, smash it on both of our channels. We definitely would appreciate that. Until the next video, that's MTGJedi. I am Bront CatHerder.